Further debate. The member from Essex.
Not even going to try to follow that act, Speaker, but it is entertaining at such a late hour of the day. Thank you very much, Speaker. It is, of course, an honour to rise in this chamber to speak on behalf of my constituents, my riding, about the bill before us right now. It's G35 Security for Courts, Electricity Generating Facilities and Nuclear Facilities Act. It is one that I have had the honour to speak about and speak to about a year, maybe a year and a half ago in its previous incarnation, one that was introduced by the then Minister of Corrections and Community Safety, Madame Mayer, and at that time it had some serious flaws that New Democrats on this side of the House were concerned about, serious questions around the infringement of civil liberties that we were concerned about, and we now continue to be concerned about some of those provisions built into the bill, and I will attempt to outline them for the pleasure of the House, as everyone is certainly attentive, listening to every word that I say while they sign their Christmas cards. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, certainly, because I don't think I'll get a chance to do that, but I know it's an important thing to do at this late of day in our sitting. Speaker, Bill 35 contains 3 schedules that would, 1, repeal the Public Works Protection Act, 2, amend the Police Services Act in relation to court security, and 3, enact the Security for Electricity Generating Facilities and Nuclear Facilities Act. Let me explain what those mechanisms do. Bill 35, of course, the first provision, the first schedule, repealing the Public Works Protection Act, something that New Democrats absolutely agree with, something that was outlined and highlighted in Justice McMurtry's report, something that we believe should be done, needs to be done, and can be done through the provisions of this bill, something that we certainly support. The need to remove the Public Works Protection Act, an act that was first initiated in, I believe, 1936, if I'm not mistaken, and 33, somebody's telling me, was brought in, I assume, to ensure the safety and security of our public spaces, whether they be courts or hydro generating facilities or even our very own legislature here. Certainly, Speaker, we understand the nature and the need to provide security and safety for not only those who work in our public spaces, but also those who visit our public spaces. However, there has to be a balance struck between the need and the provisions of safety and the need to keep our spaces open and accessible to the public. They are fundamental in our democratic system, and are the ability for people to avail themselves of the process, to come and visit us, to visit our courts, to visit the legislature, and to see what happens, and to hold us accountable, really. Speaker, the requirement or the need to remove the Public Works Protection Act and replace it with something else was born out of the G20 fiasco, really, that happened here in Toronto, where members of society from all walks gathered to protest the G20 summit that was held here in Toronto and other parts of Ontario. They were here to protest in a peaceful way. They were here to express their democratic right to assemble and to voice their opinion on what governments around the world were doing, whether it be trade agreements or human rights or environmental policies. It is, of course, their right, and as is the history of various G20, G7, G8 summits, there's always public protest. There's always dissent on what's happening. So it certainly was anticipated by levels of government, both provincial and federal, and certainly municipal, that there would be a need for security presence. However, this government of the day, under then Premier, what's his name again? I forget. He's been gone so... Dalton McGuinty. Man, we miss him. We miss him. Don't we miss him around here? He brought into play in the dark hours of the evening, brought in provisions of the then Public Works Protection Act that infringed on the civil liberties of those protesters in such a way that it has been referred to, and Speaker, these aren't my words, but it has been referred to as one of the worst civil rights violations in the history of Ontario. In the history of this province, where over 1,000 people were rounded up, kettled. That was a new word that we learned during the G20 protests. They were kettling peaceful protesters, rounding them up, holding them for 3 days sometimes without laying charges. These extraordinary powers that were given to police to really infringe on what should be a normal democratic peaceful process. Various human rights experts and civil liberties experts have denounced the actions of this government at that time. It's been referred to as a black mark on civil liberties that I don't think, and I hope, will never be replayed. However, the government has, to date, still not apologized for using those extraordinary powers, really war measures, to infringe on those actions. Speaker, we heard of people who weren't even a part of the protest, were not even within an assembly, weren't on the street, they were just watching, who were rounded up and held without charge. We heard of people who were amputees, who required prosthetics and having their prosthetics taken away from them, not charged, sorry, but taken, held without charge, and denied the prosthetics limbs that they required. I mean, a massive infringement on civil liberties and peaceful democratic protests. And Speaker, I can tell you from personal experience, as somebody who has grown up, thankfully, within the labor movement, I've been a part of a lot of protests, good ones. As a young kid, 12 years old, I think my parents put me on the bus to Ottawa to protest the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades. I hopped on a bus all by myself with a bunch of local farmers and auto workers, and went to Ottawa and protested the GATT. And it certainly was where I cut my teeth in terms of political action, and something that I think was formative in my political career. Imagine that. Imagine what we would be doing to the dissent with this message that we're sending to young activists out there. Is this what the government is attempting to do? To say, don't even bother assembling and protesting, because we're going to come down, we're going to crack down hard on you, we're going to be able to infringe on your rights, hold you without charge, we're going to be able to search your vehicle without warrant, we're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions about who you are, why you're there, without any reasonable requirement, without any reasonable grounds, is the official legal term, Speaker. And I heard from the official opposition that they are in full support of these new measures that are going to be brought in under G35 that will specifically act and be targeted at our courts and our electricity generating facilities. Two very different entities within our province. And let me try to expand on that. Our colleague from Bramalea, Gord Moulton, is our lead on the G35 bill, and he explained the difference between the nature of the public court system, the invaluable aspect that they are in terms of being accountable as our judicial branch, and having to be accessible for them to be really fully functioning in a functioning democracy. People need to be able to go, see court proceedings, understand that the process is working correctly, and not feel as though that isn't a space for them to play a role. What G35 does is it gives new powers to court security to identify or to question the intent, the reasoning, the rationale, the persona of that person going into the court prior to them entering. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you do? What's your political affiliation? They can really ask them anything, any question that they want. What does that do? What type of a message does that send to those that want to play an active role in our functioning democracy? That they're no longer welcome, that you will be guilty until presumed innocent, that without reasonable grounds we can, in fact, question your actions. Speaker, I understand, certainly, and New Democrats understand the need to provide security and safety to Ontarians. I actually believe that it is our fundamental role here. Aside from everything else we do, we have to assure the protection of people in our province, whether that's road safety, health and safety in the workplace, food safety, all measures, all mechanisms. That is our first and foremost goal, and I hope that is a priority on behalf of the government. However, there has to be a balance between providing the safety and security of people and ensuring that civil liberties are respected and human rights are respected. We believe on this side that the government fails to make that balance. No more, don't take it from me, Speaker, take it from Justice McMurtry, who certainly agreed that the Public Works Protection Act should be removed, but not replaced with something that goes even further in terms of inhibiting civil action, inhibiting people's participation in our public spaces. We understand, of course, the reasonable nature of ensuring that there aren't weapons taken into our courts. That makes sense to us, and I think it would make sense to any reasonable person. Let's ensure that there are no weapons, no bombs, nothing that could certainly harm anyone else in our public spaces. But to do that without reasonable grounds, to do that without warrant, I think goes beyond what reasonable people would think. Speaker, in Manitoba, the government in Manitoba has dealt with court security specifically. The Court Security Act was in fact a progressive and tested by the Supreme Court, very progressive, and it didn't infringe on civil liberties such as G30. We see that G35 does. It actually ensured that the public was protected, ensured that there were reasonable grounds that the police could act on and search individuals who posed the risk. However, it wasn't arbitrary. It was specific, and its prescription again was tested by the Supreme Court and found to be valid. Speaker, getting back to the G20, you would wonder why a government that purports itself to be progressive would act in such a way to its own citizens, would be so aggressive towards its own citizens gathering in peaceful protests. Speaker, we know that within the melee, within the chaos that was the G20 protests, and certainly it got violent, and there were definitely people that broke the law and most likely deserved to be charged and ultimately potentially punished. However, we know now, after the fact, there were agents provocateurs, who, and that is a reference to folks who are in the police forces that would have been dressed up as protesters and played a role potentially in provoking, merci, I get my français
Thank you.
mixed up, provoking potentially civil unrest. Provocateuring is not the word that I was looking for. How do we deal with that? How did this government deal with that? They understood that was out there. They understood that these were actions on the policing side. However, they went after those peaceful protesters en masse, without regard, without specific, identifying or qualifying those who were actually the real offenders. It's something that I think sends a chill to those who want to be, who have put their life's work on the line in terms of being peaceful, being a part of the peaceful process and being activists. Are we no longer able to assemble? Are we no longer able to provide public oversight in our court system? Is this even reaching further than what the Public Works Protection Act did? So, Speaker, we have some fundamental problems with this bill, unquestionably, and ones that we haven't seen the government address. Ones that they've heard not only from us as New Democrats, but also those experts in civil liberties and human rights that, to infuse a measure of confidence in our public system, to infuse a measure of accountability and oversight that is essential in democratic process and society, the public has to play a vital role. They have to play an inclusive role. Putting more roadblocks in front of them actually being a part of it inhibits the entire process. And what does it do fundamentally to our system? That's the question. That's the real fundamental problem that we have with this legislation, one that we're not certain the government understands. There's a third part of this, Speaker, that deals with the same provisions of security, search, seizure, access within our electricity generating facilities and nuclear facilities. I don't think anyone would argue that those aren't important public entities to protect. And they are currently already fiercely protected, and a lot of resources go into making sure that the perimeters aren't breached and that no one who shouldn't be there gets in. We definitely don't want nefarious actors around our generating facilities, including nuclear, for obvious reasons. However, Speaker, these are contentious entities in our various communities. Sometimes when a gas plant goes up in a community, a gas plant that's supposed to generate electricity, sometimes when they are proposed or built in a community, the public don't want them there.
No way.
Yeah, way. What's up with that? Sometimes when generating facilities go up in communities, the public don't want them, and they actually gather and they actually protest the building of these facilities or the costs, God forbid. Sometimes that happens, Speaker, and we have to ensure that our voices are heard. And sometimes that means them being there, near, close to those facilities with signs, with placards saying potentially, don't waste our money. Stop wasting our money, please. Who knows, Speaker? This bill certainly gives security forces, whether they be peace officers, police officers, or private security firms, new powers to search and seize without warrant. That's pretty extreme, Speaker. That's something that I think would send a chill in communities like Oakville and Mississauga if they were to have a power plant slated for their communities, that they wouldn't be able to raise their voice. I don't know. But it's one that we raise as a part of the debate here that we believe the government hasn't considered fully. We understand, of course, the need to provide those security measures. It's one that is reasonable within our civil society. We understand the need to balance protection of those facilities. But when it comes to granting those powers to security forces that may not be up to the same standard of training as our peace and police forces, and allowing them by regulation these new provisions, even stakeholders such as OPSU, who represent those security forces in our generating facilities, even OPSU is not in agreement with expanding these types of powers. OPSU President Smokey Thomas presented a survey of his members around court security, which rejected limits placed on public access to courts, as proposed in Bill 35, as well as generating facilities. So, Speaker, I think it's quite clear that New Democrats continue to have some serious reservations around Bill 35. We understand that it is born out of the failure and aggressive actions taken on behalf of the government in relation to G20. It's born out of a black mark that should continue to haunt the Liberal government and their actions around civil, peaceful protest in Toronto. We see them as going way too far in finding a balance. The withdrawal of the Public Works Protection Act should have been enough, could have been enough, and replacing it with something that we see as being far too encroaching on civil liberties, I don't think will have the desired effect, and I think it certainly can send a chill through all those who believe and stand up for peaceful democratic process and protest in our country and in the province. I thank you very much, Speaker, for the time you've given me today, and I cede my time to my colleagues who are going to speak to this bill as well. Thank you.